This is DevOps in Agile Way podcast.
Hello everyone! Finally, we reached the last letter of Colm's S, sharing. So let me share with you my thoughts about this. First of all, what this sharing is. Well, it is exactly what it is. It is about the sharing. It is some say the kind of glue which ties all the previous principles, all the teams, all people in the organization together, which allows us to share the knowledge, to spread the awareness of what company is doing and how it is doing it. And I think one of the main goals of sharing is to break the silos and, let's say, very boldly bring different teams closer. I believe that sharing is part of the culture, of course, and it is not something what is given. This is something what we need to really build. Of course, in most cases, people are willing to share their knowledge with others. I say in most cases because I know the cases where they are not. However, having this in more like a structured way, more valuable way, we need to organize the process inside the company for it. And we have different approach to this. I will come back to that a little bit later. And again, this sharing doesn't mean that, for example, .NET developer is sharing things with JavaScript developer, or DevOps engineering is sharing things with security engineer. Of course, this is a part of it, but generally we can share this with the whole company. Who is interested in this? People should be interested in this. They can join, they can learn, they can ask questions, they can understand better things which are in your scope. As I said, this sharing part is a very big part of the culture, but in order to have proper sharing activities, you have to build a proper culture. This is like obvious element. What else we can tell about sharing? As you remember, in my interview with Helen Beale, we mentioned this, and I even asked Helen what she thinks about this, and she said that this is very important part of DevOps culture, and I agree with her here, of course. Who am I to not agree with Helen? Generally, this is about the openness, this is about the transparency, this is about the building the trust between different people, different teams, different part of the organizations, and this is kind of critical. The issue here is that, and I have to say that, let's say we engineers, people who are like into trenches, we understand the power and the needs of sharing information between people. We understand the learning process, at least we understand the need of the learning process. But very often this is somehow blocked on higher levels in the organizations. So generally the executive don't see this as a valuable thing to do, to share, to spend time, to pay people to share knowledge and to listen to others, because when you are hired by them, you should know everything. What we know very well, it's not the truth, right? So depends on the, let's say, maturity level of the executives. We can have this sharing in our company, or we can just be without it. This is very important to invest time, money into this process, because building this knowledge, especially inside the company, with having company's insights into it, brings like more value to the process. What can be the measurements here? I would split them to 4 areas. One will be process standardization, second teamwork, continuous learning, and tools and system sharing capability. What we can measure in the team level, as we did for 3 letters already, we can measure, for example, automation utilization, again, tools utilization, again, documentation usage and unification, how the knowledge is shared, how many people attend to the sessions, how many people want to do that, process and documentation alignment, for example, as well. And for the individuals, well, it's a little bit more tricky. I think we can measure exactly the same things here. What we need to remember with sharing, that we have multiple ways of doing this, starting with very, very not organized approaches, like I'm just going to someone's desk and ask him to help me with things, to very organized ways. For example, having center of excellence, having communities, having these things where knowledge is shared, propagated, and also collected in very organized way. And those kind of centers of excellence can act as advisory boards or advisory teams for other teams. For example, if I have problems with installation of my Kubernetes, I can go to the Kubernetes Center of Excellence in my company, if I have one, and ask them what should I do in this case. Behind this sharing, we have also this kind of teaching model, because what is very important is not only that you are willing to share your knowledge. It's not only that you have the audience who is willing to hear what you have to say, but this is also the matter of expertise and the way of how you do things, because you can be an expert in some specific technology. I mentioned Kubernetes, so let's stay with Kubernetes, but you need to learn how to, let's say, teach others, right? So that's why we have this matrix or the approach or framework, which we can call learn, do, teach. In fact, this matrix is called learn, do, teach, lead, but in this case, I will use only learn, do, teach. And generally, this is something where we start how to learn, then we do, then we teach. The same goes to do, and the same goes to teach. First, we learn how to teach, then we teach, and then we teach teaching. It's very important to be able to pass the knowledge to others in the way that they understand, that they want to hear what you have to say, and they will be, let's say, invited by you for the next sessions. And I hope I invited you for the next session as well, for the next episode of my podcast. By the way, in the next episode, we will have very great guest, and finally we are coming back to interviews. So stay tuned and subscribe to my podcast and like it, of course, comment. And next week we will have very, very interesting discussion. So coming back to sharing, and I mentioned that I have my doubts about sharing. Because as I said, I believe sharing is very, very strong part and very important, crucial part of the culture. And of course, I understand the reasons why sharing is a separate category. I also have in mind another S in the picture, which is security. And I have my troubles to select which one should be the one. Should it be S for sharing, or should it be S for security? Why security is very important? Well, we know very well why, right? We heard so many stories about different breaches, different data loss, different vulnerabilities, etc., etc., etc. If you look on the vulnerability list for every year, there are thousands of vulnerabilities. And you can even have the vulnerabilities like a security holes in the security tools. The point of security is very important. Another, let's say, area, another layer, another perspective is security of infrastructure, especially infrastructure as code. The new thing, not that new, but relatively new thing which is coming to us is the SBOM generation, and what we can do with this, and the way how we can use SBOMs in our process to improve our security, because this is very good process to have in order to improve the security. In this security, of course, we have DevSecOps, which has completely own framework, based on DevOps, but in, let's say, focus on security. But in terms of security in Columns, if we split sharing to security, I would like to see 4 areas: people, tools, development, and processes, right? So those are the 4. We have different areas to think of. Start with people, for example, the turnover rate. Why this is important? You may say, people come and go. And yeah, you're right. When someone is leaving the company, you need to take very specific actions to ensure that this person will not have access to the resources anymore. It is important metric. It is, because those actions take time. It may be 1 minute, it may be 5 minutes, it may be 2 days. Who knows at this point in this market? For example, for tools, we can have, for example, how many tools we have in our chain. What is the process for accepting the tool into the chain? For development, we can cover, for example, automated tests and tooling coverage. Do we have automated tests, or do we have security in automated tests and things like that? For processes, this is quite simple, let's say, and we can measure, for example, time needed to resolve vulnerabilities, how well our application processes, pipelines are covered by security, etc., etc., etc. But as security is like my addition to the picture, officially we have sharing. So let's stay with sharing. That's why I shared with you my opinion, because the discussion is important. Without discussions, without disagreements, really, there is no progress. I would like to hear really what you think about this last letter S. What it should be, security or sharing, or maybe something else. And of course, if you say, what do you think? Tell me also why. Because why is probably the shortest but the most powerful question which we can ask. I'm looking forward for your comments. I'm looking forward for your ideas. I'm looking forward to discuss this. And I really hope to build on this kind of discussion, thriving discussion, hopefully. And as I mentioned, next time, finally, we will have the interview. I'm looking forward to it. See you next week. Have a good rest of the day or evening, whatever time you are listening to this episode. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DevOps in Agile Way podcast with your host, Pavel Pivosh. Subscribe, comment, and do not forget to check our next episodes. Stay tuned. Stay safe. Stay curious.